So good morning, everyone, and welcome to Minecraft Peace podcast. I'm your host. My name's Katerina Newbury, and my dear guest today is the wonderful Pete Wharmby. Welcome, Pete.
Hello.
Yay. Um, it's good to be back on the podcast. I've taken a little bit of a break, working out where to move next, really. And it's my great pleasure to have you, Pete, as my first guest in, let's say, the new series of conversations for my podcast, and talking about a subject very close to my heart, and definitely one that is basically your life,
Yeah.
which is autism, autistic children, supporting children that are on the autism spectrum and other neurodivergency, and their parents,
Yes.
as the
Yes.
journey to support children on the spectrum brings up a lot to do. It's a lot to deal with.
It
So
can be. Yes, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So welcome, Pete, and we just had a little chat beforehand, trying to get ready for this conversation. How's your morning been so far?
Yeah, it's
Sorry, I
been.
start with small talk.
Yes. Well, I'm not going to talk about the weather because,
No.
although it is actually quite nice, but yeah, my morning is, as always. I've got my very, very rigid routine that I have to follow.
Right.
As so many autistic people do. So I've, took my daughter to school. That's done. That's good. Then I go into town for a coffee. That's very set in stone. I
Tick.
have to do that. And then I got back and dishwasher on, and then started work, meetings, and now I've got this podcast. Then after this, I've got more meetings, and I'm meeting with somebody after this to talk about a talk that I'm doing in Kent, I think it is. It's just work, just busy always.
Fantastic. Okay. So to those who don't know Pete, I'll just introduce him. So Pete Wharmby is, to me, most importantly, an amazing advocate for the autistic community. He's an author of 2 books, and I have a feeling there's a third one in the making right now.
There
Yeah,
is, yes,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
finally actually got a publisher, and it's I'm just feverishly trying to get it written at the moment, and
yeah.
it should be out in September 26. Yeah.
Fantastic. So that's very exciting. And Pete was diagnosed later in his life. I think the moment where it began to kind of unravel for you was after the birth of your daughter.
Yes.
And you spend a lot of your time just raising awareness and just really sharing what it is like to be an autistic person in this world. What is it like to be a child, to be a parent to an autistic child, and doing great things in the world. So it's my great pleasure to have you, Pete, and welcome again properly
Thank you.
with an
Thanks so much.
introduction. Fantastic. So I was I listened to your book Untypical. I haven't
Yes.
read What Not to Talk About, which is all about, having very special interest as an autistic person. And there it
Yeah.
is, yay.
Yeah. Just
And
waving
there were
around.
things I was nodding along, as you do. And then there were moments where I chuckled to myself as well. And it was like the small talk and
Mm.
communication in general. So we'll just touch up on that a little bit. It's a massive topic, but communication and a small talk. Yeah, I think it's so much about the language that we use that we just don't realize. Um, and the English language in particular seems to kind of be used in almost like riddles to
Uh,
others. So my
yes.
my favorite one is, would you mind closing the window?
Yeah.
So if we can be quite literal, which means, would I mind closing the window? Nah, I'm good. So, whereas what it actually
Absolutely.
means,
Yeah.
and could you please go close the window because I'm cold or it's noisy outside or something. So that was a little bit, I had it was several moments of like chuckles like this. Eye contact as well.
Yeah.
Um even during this podcast, I I find it difficult to make eye contact. Doesn't mean at all I don't want to connect. On the contrary, but
Yeah.
actually it helps me to look somewhere else, focus on something else, to be able to have this conversation in the manner that I want to have. And then is there something that just popped to your mind now as we're talking about communication and eye contact? Maybe an anecdote recently, something you've experienced that would, again.
Yeah, I mean, just as you were saying that there, I was thinking about the weird situation of eye contact over Zoom,
Yeah,
because obviously, technology hasn't quite adapted to the point where we're able to make actual eye contact over this. But I do realize when I'm doing podcasts like this, or when I'm doing a talk online, over Zoom, or I'm recording a YouTube video, or whatever I might be doing with my phone, I never look directly at the lens. I mean, I just
yeah,
did then, but I
yeah,
normally never do, and it's
yeah.
so strange. It's like my autistic brain knows that that is the equivalent of eye contact, so I still
Mm,
don't do it.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? Which to me I think shows just how deeply ingrained the dislike of eye contact is. And
mm,
for autistic individuals, to the
mm.
point where we won't even look at the camera lens, you
Yeah.
know? And for me it feels too intrusive. I've always said this
Mm,
about eye contact. It just feels too intense.
yeah.
I don't make eye contact unless, well, I'm not happy making eye contact with anyone other than those who are, really close to me, really dear to me, like my daughter, my partner, maybe my parents, especially these days as an adult where we get on better. But apart from that, I don't want to go there. That's not
Mm,
something that's comfortable for me. I do it because I know that I've got to, because otherwise people assume you're a liar or you're not listening or all this
mm,
nonsense. So, I force myself to do it, but it always feels deeply uncomfortable. And it's a lot. It's an aspect of a larger thing about being autistic with communication, and that is that our communicative culture is just different to the
mm,
non-autistic communicative culture. So for example, it seems that autistic culture simply doesn't value eye contact, that we see our eye contact as just different to how
mm,
non-autistic people see it. Now, of course, that's been medicalized. you know that's
mm,
it's become a medical thing. Like, non-autistic people viewed autistic behavior and were like, oh, look, they don't make eye contact. There must be something wrong with them. There's
mm,
something deeply pathologically wrong there. They can't make eye contact, therefore they're broken. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Slow down there. That's a bit of a strong conclusion to come to.
mm.
There are actually lots of cultures worldwide that don't make eye contact. You don't go around telling them that they're broken, because that'd be very rude. Actually, we need to take a step back and realize maybe this is just how autistic people just are, and that's okay. And we need to be allowed to be like that, because it's not really causing any harm. But yeah, sorry, as you've just seen, I get on my high horse very quickly and I start I
That's
start,
okay.
kind of saying all this stuff. So yeah, but in terms of anecdotes, yes, I thought that the camera thing was quite an interesting one.
Yeah.
That it goes that far.
And you've just shared with us, there's several points I'd like to go back to.
Mhm.
Um, but what's just got my attention is that you caught yourself in a moment where you've realized I'm going deep with this, like I'm doing this deep dive into something that is really matters to me, I'm passionate about, and I want to talk about it. And this is again another trait, which is fantastic,
Yeah,
just for people to see what it, this is what it
yeah,
looks like. And
yeah,
it's not obsessive. It's just, it just excites you to talk about it and share it with
yeah,
others, and that's why you do it. So the word medicalized kind of just caused me to have a little bit of a reaction, because it's like there's these standards that seem to be kind of ingrained within the society of what is normal, what is acceptable, what is typical, and
yeah,
what is healthy. And this is almost suggesting that this is unhealthy in some way. And it brings me to a whole area of just operating as humans, a deep dive straight away, obviously,
Yeah.
about how we operate in humans in terms of acceptance of others and just judgment and looking at other people with, I'd say, a lens of just curiosity. Because
Yeah.
my favorite question in life is why. So,
Mm. Yeah.
I work with children, autistic children, and support their parents. And even when, my turning point was also having my sons, I had a really hard time. That's why I resonated with what you wrote about in your book. I ended up depressed, not realizing that that's what it was. I just thought
Mm.
I'm not trying as hard enough, or there's something wrong that I'm not, haven't worked out how to do well. And turns out, no, I was, I was actually depressed.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was natally, and so I just like to observe, and that's hence the question. So I would, observe my children. I've got two boys, and I would go like, why? Well, this is interesting. Why are they doing this? And I would spend time just observing, and
Yeah.
then, without kind of questioning. I mean, and then obviously what happens as a parent, there's a great school for personal development, by the way, highly recommend it. So obviously our children will do things that, the word is overused now, trigger us, but basically what it means, it causes a reaction,
Yeah.
and usually an unpleasant reaction. And I would again kind of turn inward and go, this is interesting. Why am I reacting like that?
Yes.
What is it inside of me that is uncomfortable with this? Um, so to come back to where I start, yeah, where I started is a bit like, I can imagine in a world where it would be, the norm would be actually approach everyone with an open mind, with an
Mm.
open heart, with trying to understand what it is that they need. Because for me, when it comes to autistic people and people in general, it's always about, okay, there's a reason why they react in the way, or they behave in the way they do. What is it that they need in this moment? Yeah. Or what
Yeah.
is it,
Yeah.
maybe they need something in the long term. So maybe just your reflection on what I've just shared.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that at the moment with neurodivergence generally, but if
Mm.
we just focus on autism just for ease, you're right. That is exactly what we need. We need people to be more open-minded. We need people to ask questions rather than judge. But the fact of the matter is that that's what human beings do. They do judge. To be realistic, that is just how they work. And I see the solution to this, rather than wanting every individual non-autistic person to suddenly become really curious and open-minded, because I mean, it might happen, but my word, it's not very likely. What I see is that actually the problem lies in the fact that when non-autistic people communicate with another human being, they have a set of expectations that have been long trained into them as to what to expect from that conversation. Okay. And that will differ slightly from culture to culture, but every culture will have this. They will have a kind of baseline set of expectations of what they fully and truly expect to happen in this conversation. And 9 times out of 10, nothing goes wrong. And indeed, those expectations are met. They have conversations with other non-autistic people who communicate in the same way as them, and it's all relatively smooth. But then sometimes they talk to an autistic person, maybe a child, their own child, or maybe a stranger, or somebody at work, or whatever. And because our communication style is different, their expectations are not met. And for want of a better term, they freak out, because that's what we do. Well, when our expectations are not met, when we are confronted with something different, we tend to freak out as a species. It makes us uncomfortable. It makes us wary. It makes us suspicious. And that is why, that's one reason, in my opinion, why autistic people have such a tough time in life, because that's what we're constantly crashing up against. We're constantly not meeting others' expectations and therefore we are constantly being treated as weird, odd, off, strange, don't like this. Do you know what I mean? And that's like becomes our constant experience. And I suppose the way I approach my job, if you like, as trying to raise awareness is what I'm trying to do, and I hope it works, is rather than expecting individuals to be more open-minded, which would be perfect, but is very hard to do. What I'm trying to do is to get people to simply add to their already existing list of expectations just some new ones. Do you know what I mean? New ones that encompass autistic people. So that rather than just expecting eye contact, I just cheekily get them to, I remind them, oh, did you know that autistic people you meet might not make eye contact? But that's okay. It doesn't mean they're lying to you. It's just their way. And what I want them to do is just kind of add that to their list of expectations. Just make that list of expectations a bit broader, a bit more flexible. I suppose it is pretty much the same thing as what you're saying, make people more open-minded. I guess mine's just a bit sneakier. I'm trying to get them to do it without them realizing it. Because that for me is where the problems lie. We autistic people continually confuse others and confound them, and it's not our fault, and we don't deserve to suffer for that, but sadly we do. And what we need is for other people to just know about and recognize autistic behavior and just add it to their experience of what human behavior looks like. And I often suggest to people that it's a little bit like when you go abroad for the first time and you experience another culture, firsthand. I mean, I remember that the very first place I ever went to that was not the UK, the first foreign trip that I ever embarked upon, I went to the Netherlands with my dad. I would have been about 10, I think, 10 or 11. We went on the ferry. It was a big trip. We went to Rotterdam, I think, for some reason. I don't know why, but went to Rotterdam. And that was my first experience of people that weren't British. And even at that age, I noticed differences in cultures, differences in how things work, differences in how you order a sandwich in a cafe, differences in how you catch the bus or the train, differences in how people greet you or say goodbye, differences in what people expect of you if you just, sit down with them for a moment. Every culture has these subtle differences, and part of travel and part of holidaying and part of, emigrating and moving to a new culture is assimilating that, is adding that to your knowledge of human behavior. When I travel now to, I don't know, like I'm going to Australia in a couple of months. Now, obviously, Australia is going to be very similar to the UK in some ways, but it's going to be very different in others. And I will have to adapt my expectations of how people will communicate. I do a lot of work with Americans. I work with Americans an awful lot. I think my next book is going to get an American publisher, so that's only going to increase. And I'm always struck by how actually really different American culture is to the UK. I think we like to pretend we're very similar because we share a language, but my word, I feel like I've got more in common with Germans, Dutch people, French people, definitely the Irish, than I have with Americans. I feel like actually American culture is really different, and you notice it and you accept it. Unless you're a xenophobe, most people just tend to accept it and just kind of think, oh, okay, this is how things work here. This is how people do things here. And we go along with that and we add that information into our brains. And, next time we go to the Netherlands, next time we go to France, next time we go to the USA, we kind of know better what to expect. I just want people to add autism to that. Do you know what I mean? Like just add that to that list of cultural behaviors that you can cope with. Because if that was done, if people viewed autistic culture and autistic behavior as just another culture, I think we'd all have a much better time. We'd get along better. There'd be more understanding. There'd be more empathy both ways. There'd be more compassion both ways. There would be better understanding. But it's a long journey. And again, I've gone off on one. It's interesting what you said about how it is a trait of autism to get really passionate, but it's also a trait of autism, certainly when you reach a certain age, to stop yourself from doing it. And it's interesting. I've done that twice now, haven't I? Not because of you. You haven't said anything. You haven't sat there going, "Oh God, here we go. Oh, here we go." You've sat there listening, but I'm so used to being stopped mid-flow. you know,
Mm.
from even way back in childhood when I went off on one about Sonic the Hedgehog or whatever, that you internalize it, don't you? And you expect it even when it's not going to come. And I've stopped myself twice now from getting too passionate and too deep into a topic. And I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it, about how autistic people end up. You know, we end up kind of stopping ourselves being ourselves because we're so frightened of how people will react. That even in a warm, you know, inclusive atmosphere like this, I still kind of think, I've got to stop now. I'm doing that thing again. I must be quiet. Yeah, I don't know. It's just fascinating to me how it all works.
It is a fascinating reflection that you've just shared, because it's serving us a certain purpose, because you have a busy schedule and we are actually dictated by time. So it's
That's
helping
true, yes.
us today.
That is
Today
true.
it's serving a very good purpose. So yeah, it just one little note on what you just said. It feels another aspect of like the basic human fear of the unknown.
Yes.
Anything that is different you can't relate to, like you said, the initial kind of instinct reaction is to, you know, be guarded or, you know,
Yeah.
refuse it and so forth. So completely get that. And I like how you've just explained that is to add to the kind of, you know, broaden the awareness with just adding another aspect to kind of consider and look at. I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's become one of the things I talk about the most. And you know, when we think about children, you know, and how autistic children experience, you know, school and just their childhood generally, what will often happen is, because people haven't got this way of looking at it, because people don't view it as a cultural difference, they just view it as a scary difference that they don't like. As you said, you know, that makes them feel uneasy and makes them feel what that translates to for the child is a lifetime of being alienated and othered and left out of things, and of people, even grown-ups, wincing or, like, you know, reacting very badly to their just natural behavior. You know, so, you know, you got the idea of, I don't know, you know, like my daughter, for example, maybe on the playground at school, maybe just, you know, what could she do that would be particularly neurodivergent of her? I don't know, like getting really into a dance and just doing it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, you know, until she's got it nailed. That's very much what she kind of does, you know, real hyper focus, you know, on a thing. And that might be viewed by an adult in the playground, you know, like a teacher or a TA or something, as, you know, obsessive or weird or too intense, you know. And if my daughter gets wind of that, if my daughter becomes aware of that judgment, then what happens? You know, well, the likelihood is that she'll feel self-conscious and like she doesn't want to dance anymore. And it's like, that's so sad. That's so awful. But what we have is a situation where every autistic child in the world really is dealing with this every day of their lives. The same situation of being unaccepted, unacceptable as just their natural self, and being told often very explicitly by the adults around them, you know, the people that really hold power, that they are wrong, that they are odd, strange, broken, whatever. And the damage that is doing every single day that we allow it to continue is extraordinary. You know, the repercussions of that go so deep and have such broad scale mental health repercussions, repercussions around careers, relationships. You know, I mean, I have to stop because, you know, it boggles my mind how much that is, how big an impact that's having. And we could stop it. You know, we could stop it now if we wanted to, with a good enough awareness campaign, you know, like a national or international, really focused awareness campaign. Hey, everyone, you share the planet with people that think differently to you. There's the news flash. Here are the ways that they behave and think differently. There is nothing necessarily wrong with them. They are not broken, but you need to know they're there. If we could do that somehow, then, you know, wow, things would be things will be different.
So I think I'll leave the national campaign to you, and I'll
I'll just crack
focus.
on with that.
I'll focus on like what it is, what matters to me in this respect to me, which is it starts with the parents and the
Yeah,
family unit, and you know, I mean, there are lots of families where the parents notice, you know, there is maybe something different about their child, and a lot of it is about their reaction to it. And what I what I'd like to kind of say at this point is that just go with your intuition, go with your gut feeling about, you know, yes, I observed this in my child, but deep down I know there is nothing wrong with them. And that you and then so for what I want to say is you know, there's this very difficult area to navigate for parents because they're obviously trying to kind of listen to this voice inside of them, but they're confronted with what they're kind of being maybe told in the outside world. You know, typical example is that, you know, school would say, well, as far as we're concerned, we don't see an issue, you know, they're just fine
yeah,
at school.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they genuinely may not see it because
Mhm.
obviously masking, and that's a whole different topic to talk about, but we're not going to go there. So and this is where I really just encourage parents to trust this, like in a voice, and you know, find ways to also deal with what it brings up in you, because it's not just the external kind of pressure that you may be feeling, but then there's, you know, all these kind of conditioning that we grew up with ourselves about, you know, and the worries and concerns and fears for our child, you know, that maybe there may be a voice saying, well, if only they changed a little bit in this way, they would kind of, you know, have an easier life because they kind of fit in and so forth. So it's a massive challenge from what I see for parents just to truly accept their child as they are. And which means a lot of inner work because you have to face your own kind of preconceptions and these fears I've mentioned about. And that can turn your life upside down. So this is what I love to support parents with, is that the emotional side of things, the creating the kind of supportive environment for their child. There's lots of support out there for parents to navigate you know, the education plans that, you know, need to go into place, you know, dealing with support coming from councils and local authorities. You know, that's kind of not my area, but I see it as a massive opportunity to really become the advocate for your child,
Yeah,
be their best friend, be the one who's in always in their corner. It's not easy, I get it, but I trust that, just like you talking about like a national awareness campaign, if the child can grow up in an environment at home which creates this, that's a huge like I'd say a better starting point
oh
to then
yes,
kind of be
yes.
go out there. And you know, it takes time. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's
No,
um
no. But
um but I think it's totally worth it. And now I've gone off a little bit,
no, that's
but
right. I mean, I think you're right. I think something that you said, it really resonates for me. It's parents will often feel so much pressure, you know, just from others, you know, from external sources, you know, their parents, family and friends, to parent in a particular way,
and they
or
may
to
mean well as well. Sorry that
oh
I'll
yeah, they
just
mean
jump in
well.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not like, and that makes it harder because I think it's easier to ignore advice if you know it's coming from a bad person. You know, like that's fine. But if the advice is coming from someone you respect and someone who loves you and you love them, then it becomes very, very complicated and very difficult emotionally. But what we tend to see, in my experience at least, that autistic children are often totally exposed to the judgment of those next circle of adults.
Mm.
because the parents, that first circle of adults that should be protecting them from this, don't or can't, because it's the pressure is so intense.
Right.
So what I mean by that is, you know, you imagine like, you know, a grandparent, for example, well-meaning, but still not helpful, saying, oh, you know, they've got to come off screen time. They can't be on the tablet that much. When you as a parent know that actually that's their special interest and it regulates them, and you've got that choice, haven't you? Do you defend your kid, stand as the shield between the criticism and the child, or do you react and be like, oh, actually, yeah, you're right. Right, come on, kid, off your tablet now. Do you know what I mean? And that happens so much where the child can't even count on being defended by their own parents. And I don't want to suggest that anyone watching this or listening to this would do this, but I'm sure you can imagine examples where that could well happen. And it's not an evil act. It's not like a person doing it to cause harm. It's usually just an accidental thing that occurs due to the variety of pressures that you're under. But it ends up the same result. The child is vulnerable and the child is not shielded by their own parents. You know, and you get the same with teachers. You know, the teachers will of course criticize the kid, you know, in their way that they do. And I say that as an ex-teacher. I feel happy to admit the flaws and failings of the education system. And again, the parent going to defend the child? Well, I mean, how do you? I mean, how many people listening to this have tried to defend their child against a teacher? I mean, it's a scary experience, isn't it? You know, like, you know, when the teacher is determined, you know, certain, oh no, they misbehaved, they did this thing in class, and they needed detention and that, you know, and you try and back their corner, especially at secondary school. You know, you try and defend the child and be in their corner, and you know, you end up being labelled, don't you, as a difficult parent, as a combative parent, you know, a parent that is really difficult to work with, and it's like, whoa, I'm just trying to make you understand where the kid's coming from. I'm just fighting their corner. Like, why is that not allowed? And I think that, you know, to be a parent of an autistic child is incredibly difficult. Not, you know, it's often described as difficult because the child is difficult, which, don't get me wrong, can be the case. You know, autistic kids aren't all, you know, fun and games. It can be quite challenging, especially with RSD and PDA thrown in. But for me, so much of the difficulty actually comes from outside and how you are viewed and judged for your parenting. I mean, anyone listening to this who's a parent to an autistic child, I guarantee you will have felt at one point that you were being judged as a parent. You know, that you were viewed as a bad parent because of the slightly flexible and different way that you parent, because you have a slightly flexible and different child. But, you know, again, it's that fear of difference, isn't it? It's fear of the other. And once again, parents get lambasted, get terribly treated as a result of this. And it becomes even worse if they're neurodivergent themselves. You know, I mean, for example, I'm a neurodivergent parent of a neurodivergent student. And I don't want to go into details because, you know, it's still ongoing, but the issues that throws up with regards to school and how schools view you and how schools view your behavior and how schools view your parenting is a nightmare. It's a genuine nightmare. And, you know, I can say with a hand on my heart that, you know, my daughter's with me every other week, you know, and we're at home, and it's a lovely, inclusive environment. You know, she's perfectly settled and happy, and, you know, we have a great time. But I've got this feeling all the time that if anyone was to, you know, I don't know, like sit in or something and watch, they'd be like, "Oh, this is not standard," you know, because I let her have a bit more screen time. I give her a bit more autonomy. You know, we sit down and just make weird noises at each other for a period of time every evening as a kind of stimming exercise. You know, to me, it's perfectly valid and perfectly good way of parenting. But to a judgmental outsider, you know, that's a whole different question, isn't it? And I think so many parents of autistic kids live in fear of that judgment and just how deep it can go, because we know how deep it could go. Social services, you know, all that stuff, that really frightening world where people get involved and start to judge your parenting, you know, in almost like Ofsted would judge a teacher. It's a really scary world, I think. and we're often so isolated in that yeah, you know, it's yeah, it's frightening, really frightening.
It is incredibly challenging, and one can only understand why so many parents choose to home educate their children.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
has many challenges. I mean, just on the practical side of things, or just make it possible, even,
yeah,
practically.
yeah,
But there's so much to say to this. But I think I'll just want to move on to something else, which is I loved reading this book. I don't know if you've read it, Uniquely Human,
oh
by
yes, yes,
Barry Empress. And there's a couple of things that really struck me, which is that obviously the mental health side of the struggles for autistic children, young people, adults is the kind of almost persistent level of anxiety. They kind of just goes up and goes down, but it's ever present. And in this book, Mr. Michael John Carley is quoted, who says that the opposite of anxiety isn't actually calm, but it's trust, and that autistic people, autistic children, face like three types of um, what they call a disability of trust, which is, I'll just find the right sentence here. I think it's trusting. Yeah, so the autistic people face tremendous obstacles of three kinds. One is trusting their body,
mhm,
trusting the world around them, and most challenging of all, trusting other people. So the
yeah,
word trust is huge, and there's maybe we could look at the way that autistic people may find challenge relating to their body, because obviously it's the body that is sensitive and reacts to the sensory overload or underwhelm. It's the body that creates the anxiety that they have to live with, um, and of course then interacting with the outside world. And um, I know that you've mentioned that you've tried in your book that you've tried mindfulness and that it hasn't really worked for you. One of the things I do is I'm a mindfulness and meditation teacher, and for me, it's actually I've had a very different experience. It was one of the things that got me out of depression was actually to turn to mindfulness and began learning how to actually regulate my nervous system.
yeah,
And that actually over time, I've got lots of tools in my tool bag now to kind of be able to calm myself and regulate my nervous system. And the reason I'm talking about it is that as a parent or any adult that has children in care, there's this thing called co-regulation. It's the working of the mirror neurons, which means that if I, as the adult, find a way to become calm in a situation, the child will automatically benefit from that. So
absolutely.
there is so much benefit in finding ways to kind of, yeah, regulate yourself, because if you think that, this is not for, there's so many tools and techniques that, support autistic people. But if you think this is not, meditation is not going to work for them, mindfulness is not going to work for them. If actually you do it for yourself and it helps you not just to have a calmer nervous system, but also be a better parent, because obviously that means that you, like the challenging situation that you've described with like grandparents, teachers, institutions, you become much better equipped to deal with that. So I just wonder, what was the challenge for you that you weren't able to kind of get on board with it? What was the obstacle for
With
you?
mindfulness.
Mm,
Well, I've discovered since finishing that book that the biggest obstacle for me was something called well, it's a combination of things. It's a combination of two very common aspects of being neurodivergent. One of them is called alexithymia, which is a difficulty with identifying your mood. and the
Right.
causes of your mood.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very common with autism, very common indeed. And the other thing is undersensitivity to what we call interoception,
Right.
which again is very common with autistic people. So alexithymia is struggling to identify your mood. Now, obviously, that made for me mindfulness difficult, or anything approaching mindfulness, meditation, yoga, all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know what mood I was in.
Right.
It took me ages to identify what mood I'm actually in, which means that mindfulness in particular, or mindfulness exercises that you kind of actively set out to do, are actually really difficult, because you might accidentally be trying to do them at the time when you're really emotionally not there for it, not able to do it.
Mm.
And I think that's what was happening to me. I was trying to do it at times when my mood just wasn't suitable for it,
Mm.
or letting
Right.
me access it. What I've actually found since, now that I'm aware of my alexithymia, and I give myself time and space to feel emotions as and when they finally turn up, because it really is just like waiting for a late bus. It's like for most people, something happens and they get the emotion straight away. For me, something happens and then there's this pause, and it could be days long,
Mm-hmm.
and then it finally arrives. So I'm more aware of that now, which makes me far more able to. I mean, the kind of mindfulness I practice these days is primarily nature based.
Yeah.
I purposefully set out now to spend a bit of time in the garden every day. I go out for a walk, and I very purposefully try to absorb my surroundings. I kind of try and tune in my environment so that I'm hearing the birds, I'm feeling the wind, I'm looking at the trees and the green and the light, and that for me brings actually an awful lot of joy. But I couldn't do it until I figured out this alexithymia thing.
Okay.
And the other thing, the interoception thing, you people listening might know about this. If you've got an undersensitivity to your sense of interoception, what that basically means is you're not picking up on your body's messaging
Mm.
about being hungry, thirsty,
Mm.
needing the toilet, feeling pain. And that's why so many autistic people struggle with eating, drinking,
Mm.
toileting, knowing that we need to go to sleep now because we're tired, because we're not getting those messages.
Mm.
So as you can imagine, if that's the case for you, meditation and mindfulness again is very challenging, because you're not necessarily,
Mm.
I remember one meditation or one mindfulness task that I once set myself, or that I was once set by, my hair's gone weird, that I was once set by somebody, was I had to like lie down and kind of scan, body scanning, where you feel
Mm.
the different, and I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it.
Mm.
There's no way for me to do that,
Mm.
and obviously that put me off. And it made me feel
Yeah.
quite like, oh God. But now I know about interoception. I know that I have blockages, if you like, in
Mm.
that area. I can again work around that,
Mm.
so I don't do so much the mindfulness about my own body necessarily,
Yeah.
like my own body and space, because I know that I won't get a huge amount out of that. But I do get a lot out of the external space, because
Yeah.
my external senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, are very sensitive.
Yeah.
So I get a lot of information, and that can be overwhelming. Of course, it can be
Mm.
very overwhelming and very stressful. But if I'm in the right frame of mind, and I let it kind of wash over me, and
Mm.
I hear and see everything so perfectly, that can actually be really lovely. That can be a really nice experience. So
Yeah.
yeah, like just standing in the garden, in the
Yeah.
evening, and just listening to the insects and the birds and watching the sun go down.
Mm.
I feel that so intensely that for me, that is certainly what I would, I guess, view as mindfulness. I'm very
Yeah.
in the moment, and
Yes.
I'm not overthinking. I'm not worrying about anything.
Yeah.
I'm not anxious. I'm just existing in this very
Yes.
positive way. So yeah, my next book isn't going to talk about this very much, but I will make the point of highlighting my journey in that regard.
Good.
That I'm in a better space with that now than I was, 2-3 years ago when I wrote Untypical. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And this is the thing. And I'm so glad you shared all of that, because, mindfulness is not one practice.
Yeah.
It can be tailored to everyone, really, depending on what they need. Like you say, for you, it doesn't work to connect with the body for the reasons
Mm,
you've just described, but your
yeah.
your senses are very perceptive, and therefore, and in nature. And I love that you mentioned nature as well. And
Oh, yeah.
I'll come
Yeah.
to nature in a moment. But what I just wanted to come back to the last point of what you said about, I don't worry about anything when I'm in the present, and then when I'm here and now. There's no anxiety. I'm just being, I'm just existing. And this is exactly what mindfulness is about. The fact that most
Yeah, there's no, the natural world doesn't have car alarms, does it?
yes, all of that.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Most of the noises that cause me tremendous anxiety and overwhelm, yeah, they're man-made noises. They're car engines,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
they're air conditioning units. They're people driving around on those loud motorbikes. Whereas in nature, you just get sheep making noises, and that's nice. Everything is at the right decibel level for
Yes.
humans.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and even thunder, unless you're directly underneath it, even
Mm.
thunder is in that space for me. It can be quite like, oh God, what was that? But when it's away and you can see it over there and it just kind of rumbles towards you very gently, that's a lovely sound. That distant thunder, it's wonderful. It's like
Yeah.
the sea, it's like waves crashing on a beach.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
our human brains are calibrated to that.
Yes.
So that's how we
Absolutely.
evolved.
Yeah.
We existed in the natural world before we ever existed in the artificial world. So our brains are naturally calibrated to that
Yes.
level of sound. And we've succeeded for some reason, in that very self-destructive manner we have, to surround ourselves with things that are much louder. And, and then we're surprised that we act, that we're so stressed out and so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And that's not just autistic people, everyone
Yes.
experiences. Strong believer in that.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
I guess,
absolutely. Yeah, I think do it your own way. Parent in your own way. Try not to let those others get you down.
mm,
Your child, your child's particular neurodivergent like, self. I train people on this course called Kahoo, which is all about that. It's based on the Irish word for nurturing, and it's all about this. Just allow yourself to parent in your way. Basically, allow yourself to parent your child, not some idealized child that doesn't actually exist. And that way, even though you might have short-term stresses and strains, it'll have a much better long-term outcome. So yeah, whatever, if your child needs to spend a bit of time playing a video game before school because that's the way that they regulate, because that's the equivalent of your coffee before work, then let them. You wouldn't tell an adult that they're only allowed a coffee after work, would you? That would be nonsensical. So, if like my daughter, they need that little bit of dopamine hit and a bit of a stimulation that first thing in the morning by playing The Sims for 5 minutes, it might not be socially acceptable, but I don't care because it works, you know?
Good
Thank
care.
you.